Hi everyone, welcome to the community classroom. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy. We're going to have a quick discussion related to which side of the fence your ancestors may have been on. Now, in some instances, people are having a very difficult time finding information out about their ancestors, and in some instances, people are listening to the narratives of others related to their ancestral narratives and then attributing those narratives to their own ancestors. However, what was going on with someone else's ancestor may have nothing to do with what was going on with your ancestors. And so there is a relatively new narrative that is floating around related to slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, and the role that brown people played in the slave trade. And so you have a number of people who are purporting and that those who are identified as American Indian or those who were coming in from Europe, that those individuals were pretty much in favor of what was going on in the Confederacy. That's a new narrative, in opposition to what was going on with respect to the Union. And so what has happened is there's a lot of confusion because people are adopting narratives that are not necessarily their own narratives in terms of their ancestors. This discussion is going to touch on one of the ways that you can actually find out some information, perhaps, about the politics of your particular ancestors. And it has to do with what are known as Southern claims. And so you may be able to find out which side of the fence your ancestors were on with respect to the Confederacy and the Union. Now, there are some interesting dynamics related to the Confederacy that also tie to some other countries, particularly Jamaica. And so there is some common thread there with that St. Andrew's Cross dynamic. But you have some other individuals who were on the side of the Union. What's interesting about the Southern claims is that the Southern claims were for individuals who were residing in the Confederacy or residing in the South, but they were actually Union loyalists. And so if you can get some information from the Southern claims, you can get some understanding of which side of the fence your ancestors might have been on. Even if their claims were barred, you will know whether they actually asserted the claim. And so you'll know whether they were in support of the Confederacy or they were in support of the Union. And so here's the information on the Southern Claims Commission case files. And so you have the Southern Claims Commission, which was created by an act of Congress. This was back in 1871. And what they did was they received claims coming from what were known as Southern Unionist citizens. So they were residing in the Confederacy, but they were actually Unionist citizens. And so during that time period where they were in the South and not supporting the Confederacy, they were actually financially supporting the Union. And so what these individuals were able to do was to make a claim for reimbursement for the support that they provided for the Union. Now, it's indicated that there were over 22,000 claims made. There were different ways of making these claims, but only 7,000 of these claims, a little over 7,000, satisfied this rigid test with respect to loyalty to the Union versus the Confederacy throughout the entirety of the war that was going on. And so what they did was they looked at the claim, looked at the actions, the pattern of actions of the individual to determine whether they were actually loyal to the Union or whether they were loyal to the Confederacy. And then the claim was paid based upon a showing of loyalty to the Union versus loyalty to the Confederacy. And so what you can see here is an actual petition for the Southern claims. You see the person's name is on the left-hand side. You see the amount for the filing also on the left-hand side. But then on the right-hand side, you can see an example of a listing of expenditures. And so the individual is expecting reimbursement for this. And this type of documentation also supports this idea of putting your money where your mouth is. And so this is suggesting that the person paid significantly to support the Union effort, even though they were living in the South. Again, the Southern claims is for those individuals living in the South, living in the Confederacy, but supporting the Union. So they were loyalists to the Union. And this is just another example of a family, a military family during that time period. And consistent with these assertions, you see this particular discussion about different areas in the South where clusters of people were not in support of the Confederacy. They were in the South, they weren't in support of the Confederacy, and were in support of the Union. And this is one example, was Winston County, Alabama. The contention became so great that in some instances there were individuals who were wanting to secede from Alabama. So it's an interesting dynamic, since Alabama was part of a secession dynamic. And this is just a little reminder as we wrap this up that each person's history is unique. And so while it's helpful to listen to discussions and videos about history, each person's history is going to be different. So each person has a different set of ancestors, and so the narratives are going to vary. So you can't really listen to someone who's offering a discussion about even American Indians, about African Americans, about the British, the Scots. Those are general discussions. It may or may not have anything to do with your actual history. So it's important for you to get a handle on what your ancestry is really about. And so even if your ancestors were living in the South, there is no clear-cut conclusion that indicates that they were in favor of the Confederacy. Same thing with the Union. They may have been residing in the North and been in support of the Confederacy. When you look at your ancestry and you look at records, you can get a better understanding of the politics of your ancestors, as well as their socioeconomic status and their genetic makeup. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon. Just got back today. Haven't changed, had much to say.